Мгм.
Окей, да, можно начинать.
Just for the grade up, that I can now get accepted.
Okay, are we ready to start? Yes? Okay, I would like to welcome everybody to this event on groundwater, making the invisible visible. My name is Jodie Miller. I'm from the International Atomic Energy Agency, and I am moderating this event, which is hosted by UNESCO, by IGRAC, and the IAEA. To start, I would like to pass the floor to Shamila. She is the ADG of UNESCO, and she's going to give opening remarks, followed by a video statement from the DDG of the IAEA. Shamila, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jodie, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to dear participants who are joining us, excellencies, ambassadors and ministers. Thank you very much for joining us in this unusual event.
Excellencies.
Sorry, we have a small technical. Yeah. So thank you very much for joining us to this event, which is actually co-organized by the UN Water Family, by IAEA, by UNESCO IHP, by the IGRAC, by the UNESCO World Water Assessment Program, University College London, and IAH. So thank you to our distinguished partners for coming with us today in this particular session, which is groundwater, making the invisible visible. It's a pleasure and honor to open this UN Water side event, UN Water Partnership side event, which aims actually to address the many facets of our common hidden treasure, the groundwater resources. This event is part of the 2022 year for groundwater and the campaign of making groundwater, making the invisible visible. And I would like to sincerely thank the International Groundwater Assessment Center, a center which is actually under the auspices of UNESCO. And they're also supporting all of the UN Water Family. Now, the campaign, which started on the celebration of the World Water Day 2022 in March this year in Dakar, will remain active throughout the year 2022. The culminating event of the campaign will be the UN Water Summit on groundwater, to be held in Paris at UNESCO headquarters on the 7th to 8th of December this year. I welcome all of you to come back home to UNESCO and to join us physically, please. I'm also happy to see partners from diverse sectors who are online with us mainly today, joining us in this exceptional event with International Atomic Energy Agency and many others. Thank you very much. So dear colleagues and participants, is the remedy to the water crisis under our feet? This particular event really is to understand that out of sight, groundwater is a resource most of us really think about. even if almost all of the liquid fresh water, that is 99% of liquid fresh water in the world, is groundwater. And many cities in the world actually depend upon groundwater. Groundwater provides critical support to drinking water supplies, crops, agriculture, industries, but also keeping our well-being and ecosystems. So how can we evaluate the progress towards the objectives of the International Water Decade for Action without considering groundwater, this invisible resource that we need to value? It is so much undervalued, abused, and even not known. So what would we need to look at in order to valorize much more this incredible water resource? It is so overlooked that the topic is not even discussed by policy and decision makers, and even the general public who are unaware of the importance of groundwater for water safety and water security. The UN World Water Development Report 2022 this year on groundwater, making the invisible visible, is greatly contributing to raise the profile of groundwater. It was prepared by the UNESCO World Water Assessment Program with important contributions of the Intergovernmental Hydrological Program of UNESCO, but also the contributions from experts, scientists across the world. Our participants who are with us here today, our partners, IAEA, IGWAC, as well as University College in London, the IAH, all the other international partners, and the UN water family who have contributed to this exceptional report on groundwater. As today, we will learn much more of how to make it more visible and more valorized. And what are the links between groundwater, surface water, climate change, and in particular, the interaction between the glaciers and the aquifers, the topic that is very relevant for Central Asia and many other regions of the world. We know that many glaciers are melting and receding very rapidly due to climate change. And the receding glaciers will impact, of course, the recharge to aquifers. So other aspects that we must also consider are the contribution of groundwater to adaptation measures, the importance to manage the surface water and groundwater in a conjunctive manner. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we need more science to understand these complex processes. And UNESCO is committed to supporting scientific studies through the 9th phase of the Intergovernmental Hydrological Program 2022 to 2029. The starting year will go until 2029, and the focus throughout this period will be science for water secure world in a changing environment. The Groundwater Summit in December will actually build on the scientific baseline provided by the World Water Development Report 2022. It will evaluate the role of groundwater in contributing to address SDG 6 and the Global Acceleration Framework. Now, you may be aware that this Global Acceleration Framework was launched by the Secretary General, and we as UNESCO have been mandated together with UNDESA to lead the Capacity Development Initiative. That's the CDI. So how could we work together to promote capacity development, enhance capacities also to manage groundwater resources? The aim, of course, is to be more responsible and ensure sustainable use and protection of this vital natural resource, which is invisible. All the statements from the major groundwater related events of this year will actually be compiled into one UN joint message on groundwater, and we would like to address it to the UN 2023 Water Conference next year. We must take the voice of groundwater, making the invisible visible, to the UN conference next year, because with the impacts of climate change that we face today and the future and unpredictability, groundwater will really be the remedy to the water crisis if we can value it, measure it, protect it, and sustainably use it. So UNESCO is proud to share its knowledge and contribute to this UN water endeavor. I wish you all fruitful debates and a successful forum. And thank you to our distinguished partners for being with us here today. And thank you to the groundwater experts also based in Paris, especially Alicia Aurelie, who is actually one of the very long-standing founders of this program in UNESCO. Thank you all.
Speakers and panelists, colleagues, I'm very pleased to jointly open this UN Water Side event, even if virtually. Our focus today is our common treasure, hidden under us. This event is part of the Groundwater Making the Invisible Visible campaign coordinated by UNESCO and the International Groundwater Assessment Center, a center under the auspices of UNESCO on behalf of UN Water. Each water-related event takes me back to my childhood days. I come from Morocco, a developing country. I remember so well, at age 5, I would have to wake up before sunrise. I and my siblings would walk kilometers away from home, carrying a jug or a bucket to the next water source, queuing up there, waiting literally for the drops coming from a water source, not even a fountain to fill the containers. This was our water to drink, to cook, to wash. So yes, water is very, very dear to me. I consider myself lucky today. I live in Vienna. I can just turn any tap and drink the fresh Alpine water coming out. But what would I do if all of a sudden this supply of water was just not there anymore? Millions of people wake up every day like this without a secure and safe source of water. Water resources the world over are facing an existential threat. Natural and human-made disaster, floods, volcano eruption, drought, conflicts, pandemics, fires, oil spills, waste disposal accidents, and above all, climate change are threatening the sustainability of the world's water resources. So we see this clearly in surface water systems. When the lake or the river dries up, people mourn the loss and they turn to the groundwater to fill this gap. But how much groundwater is under there? Where does it come from? Where does it go? How sustainable is this water resources? How vulnerable is it to pollution? As the global hub for cooperation in nuclear sciences, the IAEA mandate also includes helping member states understand, evaluate, and manage their water resources. Isotope hydrology provides unique information on both the quality and sustainability of water. We use our expertise in close collaboration with all the partners under the UN water system to combine all the tools at our disposal for effective groundwater management. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is clearly linked to socioeconomic development, gender equality, poverty, elevation, food and energy ecosystem, climate change, and human health. Remember the threats I mentioned before. I think the biggest threat, though, is sustainability. Investing in human capacity is probably the most important factor for sustainability, both for managing water resources and for development. This particularly is vital for member states that will be strongly impacted by climate change. Our fellowships program, country or region focused technical cooperation projects, our networks, our coordinated research projects are all geared up to transfer technology and know-how to our member states. So I look forward to increasing our joint effort to ensure the science continues to advance, to ensure the visibility of groundwater, and to ensure we can meet the challenges of protecting these vital resources. I wish you all a successful event. Thank you.
Thank you, Shamila, and thank you to Najat for those opening remarks. Before we begin, I'd just like to give a brief overview of how the event will work. The event is divided into two parts. The first part will be an overview of the World Water Day report 2022, and the second part will be a discussion about groundwater and the impacts of climate change. In both parts, we'll have presentations followed by a panel discussion, and there'll be an opportunity at the end to ask questions if you have those. So for the first section, first part of this event, I'd like to welcome Ms. Michaela Mileto. She is the coordinator, UNESCO World Water Assessment Program, and she's going to provide an overview of the report for 2022 via a video presentation.
Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, good afternoon. I'm very pleased to intervene in this session at the important conference in Dushanbe and share with you an overview of the 2022 edition of the United Nations World Water Development Report, titled Groundwater, Making the Invisible Visible. I hope these findings could inspire the discussion of the distinguished speakers and the public. The report describes the opportunities and the challenges associated with both the development and the management of groundwater across the world. The WWDR is the UN Water Flagship Report on Water and Sanitation. Published by UNESCO on behalf of UN Water, its production is led by the UNESCO World Water Assessment Program that coordinates the contribution of the members and partners of UN Water. Compared to surface water, groundwater is very abundant, accounting for 99% of all liquid fresh water on Earth, and it is distributed over the entire globe. As I said, groundwater is plentiful. As you can see on this graph, some countries such as India, USA, China, Pakistan, substantially increased their groundwater withdrawal throughout the years. However, when we looked at the statistics at the global level, only around 1/4 of the fresh water used comes from groundwater. Clearly, its full potential is still largely unexploited, notably in the African countries. But let's see some figures for its different uses. Currently, the agricultural sector accounts for 69% of all groundwater abstraction, with an uneven distribution at global scale. For instance, North America and South Asia heavily rely on this resource, respectively 59% and 57% of the areas equipped for irrigation use groundwater. Instead, in sub-Saharan Africa, where only 3% of the total cultivated land is under irrigation, only 5% of this land is irrigated with groundwater. Domestic uses. Domestic uses account for 22% of all groundwater abstraction globally. It is estimated that groundwater supplies nearly 50% of the global urban population, including many in the world's largest cities, increasing the risk of overexploitation and depletion of the aquifers. Finally, industry, including manufacturers, mining, oil and gas, energy generation, engineering, and constructions, account for 9% of all groundwater abstraction at global scale. Riparian zones, wetlands, and other freshwater ecosystems depend on groundwater, as well as many terrestrial ecosystems and related biomes. Groundwater supports the base flows of streams and rivers, crucial to avoid the risk of falling dry during periods of droughts. Unfortunately, groundwater knowledge and management is often insufficiently included as part of the ecosystem protection and management. Another really important characteristic of groundwater is that it is less impacted by climatic variations and evaporative losses than surface waters, and presents great opportunities in terms of climate change adaptation and mitigation. And you will talk more in depth about this in the panel. Adaptation measures can exploit the groundwater storage and the capacity of aquifer systems to store seasonal and episodic water surplus. In terms of CO2 reduction, the heat stored in groundwater called geothermal energy can be transformed into electricity or used directly for heating, cooling, and other uses. Deep aquifers can be used for carbon sequestration to curb accumulation of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. But there are also challenges, which are often due to the fact that this resource is poorly understood and consequently undervalued and sometimes mismanaged. In spite of its overall abundance, groundwater remains vulnerable to overexploitation and to pollution, both of which can have devastating effects on the resource and on its availability. Groundwater storage depletion is a major global problem. Its rate is estimated between 100 and 200 cubic kilometers per year. It causes declining groundwater water tables, oftentimes beyond economically reachable depths, and has an impact on the livelihoods of people who rely on shallow wells to get their drinking water or to irrigate subsistence farming. Another challenge is groundwater quality. In general, quality is good because the systems are usually better protected against pollution than surface water due to the filtering power of rock formations. However, groundwater pollution is a virtually irreversible process. Once contaminated, aquifers tend to remain with polluted waters. To sustainably untap the full potential of groundwater, we need to have in place sound governance frameworks and management plans. Groundwater management planning provides a mechanism for coordinating across the many actors involved in groundwater management and for integrating and synergizing across the multiple policies and tools used. Integration with environmental management, with land use management, and with the management of space, of resources of the subsurface are all important issues with the purview of integrated water management. Developing water supplies that are resilient to climate change will in many parts of the world involve the use of groundwater conjunctively with river, lakes, and other surface water reservoirs. Coordinated land and groundwater management can enhance storage and retention and protect water quality. Policies, strategies, and plans should be based on the priority and aspiration of local population. Data collection and sharing of information are often deficient, especially in low-income countries. The report advocates that groundwater data collected with public funds should be freely accessible, and private companies should disclose relevant information on subsurface parameters. For example, geophysical and borehole data acquired during oil and gas exploration could improve knowledge of the aquifer extent and characteristics. The majority of large aquifer systems is transboundary. They represent a sizable share of global groundwater resources, and many of them are connected to valuable freshwater ecosystems. Action on the aquifer in one country have a significant impact on the other side of the border. Therefore, establishing transboundary aquifer cooperation is a priority. In conclusion, It is evident that groundwater represents an enormous supply of fresh water globally. In a world of ever-growing water demand, where surface water resources are often scarce and increasingly stressed, the enormous potential of groundwater and the need to manage it sustainably cannot be longer overlooked. To do that, we need to apply strong and concerted efforts to manage and use it sustainably. And this could be done only if we know the resource, we get more data and sound scientific evidence to finally make groundwater visible. With this, I conclude my presentation, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Michaela, for that insightful overview of the World Water Day report. To respond to that presentation, we have three panel members with us today who I'd like to introduce. The first, we have Mr. Aurélien Dumont, who is an Associate Project Officer, Section of Groundwater Systems and Water Cooperation, Water Sciences Division of UNESCO. Mr. Federico Properzi, apologies if I get that wrong, who's the Chief Technical Advisor, UN Water Technical Advisory Unit. And then I must apologize to Lulia. I actually don't have the right details in my document now. Perhaps you could introduce yourself for us.
Hello, and I'm Yulia Trambitskaya. I'm an Environmental Affairs Officer in the UNEC, United Nations Economic Commission for Europe.
Thank you, Lulia. And apologies for that. Lulia's come in at short notice because we had a conflict with somebody else who was going to present. Thank you. All right, so I would like to start by posing a question to Aurélien. We've seen from Ms. Miletto's presentation here that there are a number of critical challenges that still need to be addressed. Is UNESCO planning any specific interventions or activities that address these challenges? Could you elaborate there?
Yes, thank you very much, Jody. Good afternoon, everybody. So, in fact, many of the assessments and recommendations that we saw in Michaela's Miletto presentation and also introduced by Madame Mary Bedwell at opening statement are based on studies and contribution by UNESCO IHP. So I will not, of course, review them all now, but what I wanted to highlight first is a long-standing and ongoing initiative of UNESCO IHP regarding the hydrogeological mapping. For instance, a few years ago, the production of the groundwater resource of the world map that you saw in the previous presentation. More recently, we have also mapped groundwater systems in small island developing states, SIDS, and the last endeavor within which is under this YMAP program, which is the program that jointly conveying different partners organization for this hydrological mapping. So the last endeavor has been in association with several Geological Survey of Europe, Geological Survey of France, Germany, and the UK to map together the groundwater resources of West Africa, the ECOWAS region. So this is, in fact, a good example of action of UNESCO IHP. And I would add to this the mapping of transboundary aquifers also. And mentioning transboundary aquifers, this link directly with the UNESCO joint action with UNECE as co-custodian agencies for the monitoring of SDG indicator 6.5.2 that monitors progress towards water cooperation. And in fact, it has highlighted several issues regarding groundwater knowledge and data, and in particular, the need to invest more in and more heavily in building capacity on groundwater resources, because many of the countries, when reporting on this indicator 6.5.2, were had difficulties to gather data on their transboundary aquifer. And also, there is a need also to transfer this knowledge by countries into concrete policy agenda for cooperation of the transboundary aquifer resources. probably my colleague from UNC will expand a little bit on this topic, but this initiative was really an unprecedented opportunity also, on the other hand, to raise awareness of member states and governments on this important topic of groundwater. So maybe this helped to make a little bit more visible the invisible, at least at this level. Shortly, in fact, we can say more generally that, in fact, by establishing baseline and promoting data collection, science, and data sharing, UNESCO is making the case for groundwater and establishing the condition for an enabling environment so that groundwater can be developed by everywhere in the world to make a difference to address our most pressing water and even more broader socioeconomic challenges. UNESCO also has been helping member states in reviewing and strengthening their legal and governance framework, for instance, in particular regarding the management of transboundary groundwater resources. So this really needs innovation at a technical level, at scientific level, but also having an integrated view concerning all the stakeholders. And this is also a concept that UNESCO is currently promoting, the concept of socio-hydrogeology, and where we intend to look also at the integration with the social environmental aspects and how local populations are related with hydrogeological research. And this is directly in line also with the open science approach of UNESCO, which is a big framework that UNESCO has approved recently to encourage sharing of knowledge and open data. In particular, also promoting citizen sciences, gender, among other aspects. So with all this initiative, we really aim to build a more equitable sharing of these groundwater resources, so equitable for current generation, future generations, but also taking into account all related challenges regarding environmental uses and trying to be as much integrative as possible, always based on the basis of science, of course, as the main mandate of UNESCO. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Aurelian. And if I'm not mistaken, there are some copies of the ECOWAS map at the back of the room if people would like to take them. It's a great map. I was there at its release in Dakar. I'd like to move on now to Federico, if I may. Federico is a representative of UN Water. Can you tell us actually a bit more about the background as to why groundwater was chosen as the theme for the World Water Day 2022?
Thank you very much, Jody. Good afternoon, everybody. So, and first of all, I would really like to thank all colleagues who have worked hard for the organization of this event. So thanks so much, and great thanks to UNESCO and IGRAC for coordinating this year's campaigns. So I think in the opening remarks and also my colleague Michela's presentation, it's very clear why groundwater is important and why it needs to be chosen as a theme for a World Water Day and a World Toilet Day campaign. So I will not talk about that. I will put this campaign into the bigger picture of what's happening also with the conference. Then, as a matter of like historical information, we had a World Water Day on groundwater, but back in 1998. So, voila, it was many years. We had not, as a UN community, as a water community, talked about groundwater and elevated it to the level of the World Water Day. So, why the World Water Day theme and World Toilet Day theme is important? It is important because it puts a certain topic, certain challenges under the spotlight. So it's something that we talk about. There is a whole UN World Water Development Report written on it. And so it's something that it's also used, for example, at the Stockholm World Water Weeks as a main theme to organize all the sessions. So it creates a dialogue, it creates a technical dialogue, a policy dialogue, which is very, very important to advance the agenda. Now, the topics are chosen by the UN Water family. So the World Water Day and World Toilet Days were established by UN resolutions, GA resolutions. The topics are decided by the UN Water family, when members and partners together at the UN Water meetings that happen twice a year. Once a while, we look ahead, we plan ahead and see what themes we should talk about for the upcoming years. And we look at also what's happening outside the water community that could be relevant to choose those topics. Now, we heard how important groundwater is, and we knew that there is a UN 2023 Water Conference coming up, so that the 2022 campaign would be so important to also feed messages to the conference. So this is also why groundwater was chosen in 2022. And this is why, actually, for the first time ever, we'll have a whole summit on a World Water Day theme. So we'll have a summit on groundwater, kindly hosted by UNESCO in December. So this is something that it's very exciting for the whole UN Water family. Just before the summit, we're also having the UN Water meeting in Paris, UNESCO's headquarters. So it will really bring the water community together. So thank you very much. And back to Jody. Thanks.
Thank you, Federico. Appreciate those remarks. And then I would like to move to our final speaker, Lulia. How does the UNECE Water Convention provide the groundwork for developing cooperation on groundwater resources, considering the many dimensions of its use, such as the nexus with food and energy?
Thank you very much, Jody. So the Water Convention, or the full title of this convention, is Convention on the Protection and Use of Transboundary Watercourses and International Lakes. It is a global legal framework for the management and protection of transboundary surface waters and transboundary groundwaters. And it specifically requires countries to enter into agreements and to enter into agreements on the protection of their transboundary surface and groundwaters at the basin level. And the convention is not just a paper, basically, it also has an intergovernmental institutional framework, such as various working groups and task forces, which support parties in implementation. And this intergovernmental framework has developed many tools which can actually facilitate cooperation on transboundary groundwaters. And one of such tools is the Nexus Assessment, the assessments which allow you to look at the interlinkages between water, food, energy, ecosystems, and to develop mutually beneficial solutions. And these Nexus assessments have been applied in several transboundary river basins, but they have also been applied in one transboundary aquifer basin. This was the Northwest Sahara Aquifer System Assessment in 2017-2019, which developed a package of implementable solutions in the areas of governance, in the areas of economy, policy instruments, infrastructure, and innovation. So the tools are available. And another instrument which I would like to mention in this fora is the model provisions on transboundary groundwaters, which were developed by the parties to the Water Convention, but also with great involvement of UNESCO and with involvement of the International Association of Hydrogeologists. They were adopted in 2012, and they represent non-binding guidance about how to conclude legal agreements on the transboundary groundwaters, or how to revise the existing agreements. And we believe that in light of the recent conclusions of the second reporting exercise on the SDG indicator 6.5.2, these model provisions can be really used by countries in order to push forward the conclusion of the agreements on transboundary groundwater. And currently we are doing a project in the Senegal-Mauritanian Aquifer Basin, also with involvement of IGRA, in partnership with the Geneva Water Hub, where countries have recently committed to develop the legal and institutional framework for the management of the Senegal-Mauritanian Aquifer Basin. And this would be a great opportunity to apply the model provisions and to apply the 2008 draft articles on the law on transboundary aquifers that the model provisions are very much based on. So these are just a few examples.
Thank you very much. I think there are a lot of very good ideas there, a lot of good suggestions, interventions that are taking place and illustrate the importance of working together in a very multifaceted approach to collectively improve the whole situation. That actually concludes our first part of the session, and we're going to move now to more consideration of the interaction of groundwater and climate change. And to start that session, I'd actually like to ask Anil to come and give us his presentation. Anil is the, sorry, I'm just quickly going to my notes, the Chief Section on Hydrological Systems, Climate Change and Adaptation, Water Sciences Division at UNESCO.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And I would like to, before the PowerPoint is presented here, I would like to also recognize the presence of a hydrologist, a glaciologist, Maria Sosakdonova, whose work I'm going to refer, and you might need to understand. She has done tremendous work. She's a professor at University of Reading, and we had a chance to interact also some of the things I'm going to refer. Thank you very much. And if there is any technical question, you can refer to her as well. And also we have a Professor Kayumov from the Glaciological Center. So I'm just taking, and he has also done tremendous job. We are working together. Serikzan, are you ready for my presentation? So as you see, UNESCO work with the scientific community across the world, from the region as well as from outside. Okay, so let me see in my desk because I don't really see that. You know, this background photo that I have taken back in 2009, Lake Sares, which is up in the altitude of 3,000 meters, Samila will see tomorrow. You need to take a picture. This is created by massive earthquake of 1911. And besides that, Usoi Dam, which is not engineered dam, of course, the dam from the landslide, 17 cubic kilometer of water. So because of melting glacier, water level are rising. Probably Professor Kayumov will be able to tell more about it. But UNESCO organizes scientific country. Also, we have to understand surface water, groundwater interaction. How the melting water impacting groundwater reservoir. Let's go to next slide, which I will not go into the detail. As we have heard IPCC emphasize a lot about water, and also the key message is the water provides resilient to the adaptation. So this is, I'm not going to go to read details, but this year's IPCC report on vulnerability really emphasizing water is a critical role, water has a critical role, and it also provides resiliency. Serikzan, please, next slide. And this, the world glacier have lost about 9,000 gigaton over the years until 2016. And you can see there are lots of places where glacier lost in mass. And that is what we have to recognize. Can you go to next slide, which we will talk about, you know, because of the glacier mass changes, we have all sorts of implications: sea level rise, local impact, change of runoff patterns, natural hazard, as well as watershed draining and water shortages. And that has to have understanding of surface water, groundwater interaction. Next slide, please, Serikjan. The groundwater has an important role as it plays a buffering zone, and in the low flow time it releases. So we need to understand the interaction between melting glaciers, snow and ice, and the stream flow that is recharged from the groundwater. Next slide, please. And here we see the glacier contribution to some of the river basin. Of course, Aral Sea, we have a significant contribution coming from the glacier melt, but not in the Ganges that much. In those we have, so there are several basins that has impact from the and significant contribution we see from glacier contribution. Serikjan, the most important thing here in the Central Asia, which is where we are located, the upstream countries which are from the runoff formation zone, and I would like to refer to studies undertaken by Professor Maria Sasakedonova in 2018. Despite the observed reduction in glacier areas, 36 to 50%, there are no reduction in stream flow. And I would like to argue that we must have a deeper understanding of surface water, groundwater interaction. And she's also did some studies with the isotope, I think. So, you know, she's nodding here. So any technical question goes to her directly. Next slide, please. Within that framework, and IHP 9 come up with the 2 priority area and 2 output that will deal with cryosphere melting and adaptation strategies. So I just want to highlight, please go through IHP 9, and we all need to work together to come up with the adaptation strategies. Next slide, please. And in order to address some of those questions with Professor Kayumov and also with many of you, we have launched these projects. And the inception meeting, I remember that both Maria and Professor Kayumov were there in 2019 in Almaty when we had the inception meeting of these 2 projects. The one is already launched, and we need your support to implement these activities in all the member states. Next slide, please. And with that, with the implementation of this project, we will try to enhance monitoring of glacier, snow, and water sources. We want to better understand surface water, groundwater interaction, cryosphere impact on stream flow system. And then we want to create a mapping of glacier and glacier hazard. Next slide, please. And we have done this work for Andes River Basin. And this one not only provide the atlas, the mapping, but also provide adaptation strategies. And we are hoping to have those adaptation strategies coming out of those 2 projects here in Central Asia. Next slide. And we want to bring these key messages of cryosphere melting, its impact on groundwater, surface water, groundwater impact, as a contribution to SDG accelerator framework when we have built the database. And also we want to bring a strong message to COP27, Groundwater Summit highlighted already, and also to New York Water Summit. And with that, I would like to thank you for kind attention and also need to rush for another session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anil. I appreciate you taking the time to give us that presentation. I understand that you need to move because you are the moderator at another session that will start shortly. But thank you for your contribution and your attendance here. Much appreciated. Moving from very cold areas, we're going to move to a different type of environment with a presentation by Professor Richard Taylor, who is at the University College London. He is a recognized expert in the field of groundwater and climate change, contributing to the 2022 World Water Development Report and referenced in Chapter 4 of the latest IPCC report. Richard's focus has to hear from him now. He has a recorded statement as well.
Dobry dzień. My name is Richard Taylor. and I'm a professor of hydrogeology at University College London. I'm going to speak to you in this session on the contribution of groundwater and aquifers to climate change adaptation and mitigation, and the resilience of communities to climate extremes. Uncertainty persists in where and when and how much rain or snow will fall under changing climates. One universal impact of a warming world is the transformation of precipitation to fewer but heavier rainfalls, something that's particularly pronounced or greatest in the tropics. This intensification of precipitation increases the flood risk, generates more frequent and prolonged droughts, but multi-decadal piezometric observations from across tropical Africa reveal a pervasive bias in groundwater recharge to heavy rainfall, and also the importance of focused recharge by episodic river flow in drylands. When we look at this more broadly, at global scales and at the scales at which we can detect changes in freshwater storage using GRACE satellite data, what we can see is episodic increases in groundwater storage in drylands are associated with replenishment from heavy, extreme heavy annual precipitation, that exceeding the 90th percentile. So there's an emerging picture here of where this universal impact of the intensification of precipitation can, not in all, but in many environments, particularly in the tropics, enhance groundwater recharge. So groundwater thus becomes a logical source of freshwater storage to supplement soil moisture, say through irrigation, and that soil moisture, which is reduced by the intensification of rainfall and amplified evapotranspiration caused by global warming. So groundwater there becomes a logical source not to improve food security, but also access to safe water. When we now take the specific example of the interactions between the cryosphere and groundwater, we can see that changes in meltwater regimes from alpine glaciers and snowcaps have typically reduced the duration and magnitude of lowland river flow. Lower river flow in summer months impairs the renewability of groundwater withdrawals in drylands for agricultural and domestic water supplies. So there's this counteracting impact associated with these changing meltwater regimes. Further, we think more directly about, more broadly around the indirect impacts of climate change on groundwater, such as through changes in irrigation demand. Some of these can be greater than the direct impacts or even offset that of climate on recharge. And groundwater depletion, for instance, has been widely observed in dryland agricultural systems, including some of the world's most productive systems, such as in the Central Valley of California, the Southern High Plains in the US, the North China Plain, for instance. So in summary, the intensification of precipitation under climate change favors groundwater recharge in some environments, suggesting that groundwater can support climate resilient adaptation to climate change. However, we also notice that in response to global warming, meltwater regimes from snowpacks and glaciated headwater catchments, such as the Himalayan plateau, these regimes themselves are transitioning, transforming, occurring earlier in shorter periods, and this leads to reduced summer recharge in the lowlands. These direct and also indirect impacts of climate change on groundwater resources, such as through rising irrigation demand in drylands, can nevertheless lead to groundwater depletion. And so governance of the resource itself and embarking on pathways towards sustainability in the use of groundwaters, particularly in our drylands environments, is a priority concern. The capacity, though, for groundwater to supplement soil moisture and enable communities to adapt to conditions within a warming world, nevertheless is there. Thank you.
All right, that's a very good summary from Richard about some of the complexities with groundwater depletion, something that of course is invisible to us. It's happening underground, we don't see it, but something that we need to be cognizant of all the time when we are planning and using groundwater. Richard, hello, how are you?
I'm very well. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I'd like to thank
Great.
you for your presentation, and I appreciate you joining us here live so we can see you. All right, so at that point, that actually brings me to my presentation. And I was giving quite a lot of thought to what I should say. Most people tend to look at the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and ask, why am I here? What am I doing in a water seminar, water session? And I say, well, the IAEA has a wide mandate in nuclear sciences. And the nuclear science that I work with is isotope hydrology. We use isotopes to better understand the water cycle. We can look at the isotopes of the water molecule itself, the oxygen, the hydrogen, and we can use those differences between different water molecules to trace their movement through the hydrological cycle. We can look at the differences in precipitation, evaporation, based on fractionation, the distribution of those isotopes in different molecules. And those molecules are, although that fractionation is particularly useful in understanding the impact of climate change, because the way in which those isotopes are distributed is strongly temperature dependent. Normally, when I get to this point and I'm talking about groundwater, I would start talking about groundwater depletion, but we've already heard about groundwater depletion from Richard. And so what I thought I would talk about is taking a sample. And I talk about a sample of nitrate. So we look at pollution. We look at nitrate contamination in water systems. And I'm sure most of you are aware that excess nitrate leads to eutrophication of waterways. And it's one of the major problems, one of the major issues that we face, particularly in surface water systems. When we take a nitrate sample, we have to keep it cold. Typically say you need to keep it below 4 degrees. And that's to stop biological activity, which messes up our nitrate isotope work. Keep it below 4 degrees. Many, many years ago, a scientist put their hand up and said, wait, we are putting too much CO2 into the atmosphere. The planet is going to warm. And the people said, well, how much? And they said, well, 1, 2 degrees, maybe a bit more. And the people said, oh, it's just a few degrees. What difference will that make? It's my first time in Tajikistan. I don't normally work with the cryosphere. I see the IPCC reports. I listen to the science. I am a scientist. But here in Tajikistan, I see the difference that a couple of degrees makes. As the planet warms, the snowpack diminishes, the glaciers retreat. The groundwater system that is fed by those glacier systems starts to warm. And maybe it's just warming a couple of degrees, But what does that mean about the biological activity that occurs in the groundwater system? The biological activity that we don't see, but it's there. We need to produce food. We use water to produce that food, but we also use lots of fertilizer, lots of compounds that contribute nitrate to the groundwater system. And as that groundwater system in areas that are glacially fed warms, we need to be cognizant of the consequences. It might just be a couple of degrees, but we have the benefit of hindsight now. We know the difference that a couple of degrees can make. We need to think about the future. As the system continues to warm, what impact will that have on the groundwater system and the biological activity that occurs within it? We see that in the surface water system because it's visible. It might not be visible in the groundwater system, but we need to keep it visible in our minds and in our thinking. Thank you. Actually, I'm the moderator. I don't want to stop, do I? At this point, I have two other panelists who are joining us. Professor John Pomeroy, who is Distinguished Professor, Department of Geography and Planning. He's a Canadian Research Chair in Water Resources and Climate Change, and he is the Director of the Global Water Futures Program. And I also have Professor Kurimov, who is the Director, State Scientific Institution, Center for Research of Glaciers of the National Academy of Sciences in Tajikistan. Professor, would you like to come join me at the front? I beg your pardon? Yes, there is not a translator. Yeah. We have some, thank you very much. We have some volunteers for the translation. Thank you.
Administration.
Thank you. I'm actually going to start with Professor Pomeroy, and the reason is it's 2 a.m. in Canada. He's very kindly joined us at 2 a.m., but perhaps we'll get his feedback first and allow him to get some sleep. John, are you there?
Hello, I am there, and thank you so much. I'm joining you from the UNESCO World Heritage Site of the Canadian Rockies in Western Canada, and yeah, it's 3:30 or something like that. So,
thank you, John. John, I hope you've been able to follow the session and hear the presentations. We'd like your perspectives now on what does the future hold for groundwater, given how climate is changing.
okay, thank you, and I will draw some comments from a Canadian panel that convened a few years ago on groundwater sustainability, which mapped out a path for groundwater sustainability in Canada in the hopes that some of this is useful on a global context. I'm also a hydrologist and glaciologist. And of course, in Canada, we're undergoing a shortening of the snow-covered season, loss of permafrost, retreat of mountain glaciers. Sounds like Central Asia. It's as in many mountain and cold regions of the world. And we're seeing changes to our groundwater regime. In Northern Canada, permafrost areas are thawing, and we're seeing the emergence of base flow, indicating an active liquid groundwater system emerging in these areas. Its characteristics are almost completely unknown. It's emerged only in the last decade in some Arctic streams. But so we're seeing rapid changes like that occurring in parts of the country. In the mountains, we've had substantial deglaciation. We've lost 1/3 to 1/2 of our glaciers in the last half century, but we're also seeing a shortening of the snow-covered period and longer summers to get through. This is a big problem because much of our mountain groundwater recharge is occurring from snowmelt and secondarily from glacier glacier melt. The last summer, we had temperatures approaching 50 degrees in Western Canada in June. Unprecedented, blew the Canadian record by 5 degrees, which you don't want to see. And we saw what happens when that occurs. Our snow melt fed streams flushed into flood in late June and then rapidly went dry in July. Our glaciers went into the fastest melts ever occurring, and we ended up with two water worlds. The glacier-fed streams had high flows, 2 to 3 times their normal summer flows. The other streams went dry. Groundwater was depleted within a few weeks under these extremely warm temperatures of 20 to 30 degrees, even in high alpine locations. This tells us how important the glaciers are in moderating droughts and extremes from climate, and also tells us what we have to worry about as we move to the end of the century and face a deglaciated future in many of these mountain headwaters. So that groundwater regime is going to be even more important in maintaining base flow, in maintaining water supplies, ecosystem services, and agricultural irrigation supplies, but it's going to be more vulnerable without the snow and ice recharge of this. Finally, I'll conclude with 5 goals for groundwater sustainability that were developed by the Sustainable Management of Groundwater panel. Protection of groundwater supplies from depletion, protection of groundwater quality from contamination, protection of ecosystem variability, achievement of economic and social well-being, and application of good governance. And in particular, I talk about good governance, that criteria for governance generally involve inclusivity, participation, transparency, predictability, accountability of decision makers, and the rule of law. And scientific knowledge will not be enough to manage groundwater in the future. We need good governance as well as the science to be able to move forward. So I'll stop there and pass it over to Professor Koyamov. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, John. I really appreciate your taking the time out, or the day or the night out to join us, and appreciate your insights. Thank you. So that brings me to Professor Kurimov. Professor, you've heard some of the perspectives on groundwater, on climate change from the previous speakers. What is your perspective on the impact of climate change on groundwater in Central Asia?
Thank you very much. Underground water is a very big problem for our country, because underground water in the mountain is very big. We have very little information about these situations because during after collapse Soviet Union stopped all research in the Tajikistan. Thank you very much, the organization, because with collaboration with you, we can study new etap, new branch research, hydrological cycle. Underground water, we couldn't research and without with isotope. Isotope is couldn't identify it where there is water. What is water? Because in the mountains have lake. It's no in river. It can see in the high, in the low. What is this problem? We haven't answered. Monitoring to like during 10 and 12 years. In this moment, is lower life is water in the highest. It is very dangerous because it's very big. Like in the in low part, in the different situations, because during climate change, in the temperature heights, changing concentrations in the chemical concentration in the underground water. And the problem is pollutions in this moment, because concentration is chemical in the underground was in the increasing. I think is this moment after this conference, we're starting new branch. It is very necessary for our country because underground water, it is really resource for our country. In one moment, underground water can be dangerous. I would like to see one moment. In the 2005 year, weather is good. No any precipitation. No, it's good. Water flow is very big in the Warsaw. Water situations. We research during 5 and 6 years. Прорыв какой? Breakwater is underground water, because I think is must research underground water is a complex pollutions, dangerous, and water resource in the mountains. In the finish, I see about glaciers melting. 20%, 50% can be river in the no changing. Changing is no big. What doing is the water? Where? It's questions. Yeah, in the going is underground because it's very big glaciers. Fetchenko. You can see very big river, really big river. In the Surkhop, haven't this water. What is it? More question. Thank you. I think when is collaboration with you against it, we can answer. We can answer is more question in the underground, надводные, подводные, all questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor, for those remarks. I think it's probably just worth mentioning that we have started a project with Tajikistan using isotope hydrology. But in the broader context, it's important to work together with all our partners. And in that sense, we are currently looking at reinvigorating the cooperation that we have with UNESCO on the Joint International Isotope Program to better integrate the actions that the IAEA does with UNESCO. And on that note, I might just hand over to Aurelian again, because we also want to just remind everybody about the Groundwater Summit that will be occurring in December. We have a slide for that, I believe. Yes, the Groundwater Summit occurring between the 7th and the 8th of December this year. And Aurelian, would you like to make a few remarks about the Groundwater Summit to close the event? And then we can take informal questions.
Yes, thank you, Jody. Let me also thanks on behalf of UNESCO, also all partners that organize the session and the panelists you have today, and interesting conversation which show all the complexities that we have when we're studying aquifer systems, particularly in contexts where there are also linkages with with glaciers and snow and all the feedback retraction we have between recharge and all this system make sometimes very complex assessment to take. And this also translates in decision making. And of course, this is really an objective of this summit to put all these question of linkages between science, policy, decision making, governance at the summit. And so there is currently, so the main summit will take place on 7-8 December at the UNESCO headquarters. It will be organized under the 5 SDG 6 accelerators that have been established by UN Water. So one topic on data and information, one topic on capacity building, one topic on innovation, another one, we have also, I should talk, I know my memories, but well, so we have these 5 sessions, but also your contribution can be expected also in terms of organizing side events on the first day, pre-summit events on the 6th of December. So I invite you, of course, to register and to follow the events and contribute as much as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aurelian. At this point, we're at the end of our event. Are there any questions that anybody would like to ask? Yes? There's a microphone. Do you need translation assistance?
Во-первых, примите наши положительную реакцию на проведение подобных мероприятий по подземным водам. Это очень нужное мероприятие. Но мы вас очень долго искали. Мы обратились в секретариат, сотрудники секретариата, потом обошли 2-й, 3-й этаж, вот вас нашли. Наконец-то. Вы так что извините за наше опоздание. Очень... Ой, извините.
So he's saying that he's really appreciates for the organizing of this event. That's really important, and he was looking for you for some time. That's why he's a little bit late. But anyway, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Значит, в Всемирный день воды 22 марта я на сайте UN Вода обнаружил небольшое резюме на русском языке о заглавлении «Подземные воды сделать невидимым видимым». Это было просто, я был в восторге от публикации этой резюме.
So he was really excited about the publication on groundwater make invisible visible. He found a short summary in Russian language, and he was really excited about this report. That it's and what was in it.
Вот самое интересное было дальше. Там была ссылка на полный доклад на английском языке. К сожалению, я не смог получить доступ к полному докладу на английском. Теперь у меня вот главный вопрос. Во-первых, вот полный доклад будет ли переведен на русский язык и как скоро она будет опубликована? Спасибо.
So unfortunately, he was not able to get access even to the full report in English. And his main question is when the report will be translated to Russian.
We are going to say that we are working on that, and we will try to provide feedback as soon as possible. Unless we have, can you provide input on that?
I can just add because my name is Sirikjan. I'm working for UNESCO Almaty office, and you talked about the online presentation of the World Water Development Report that we organized just a couple of weeks ago. Меня зовут Сирикжан, я работаю в представительстве бюро ЮНЕСКО в Алматы, и мы вот несколько недель назад организовывали онлайн-презентацию, про которую вы сейчас говорили. Да? К сожалению, сам репорт, весь репорт на русский язык, он не переводился и, скорее всего, не будет переведен. Есть только summary, общее резюме.
Общее резюме есть уже.
Да. К сожалению, весь репорт только на английском языке сейчас.
Почему на английском доступа нет?
Unfortunately, I thought that we don't have a Russian version of the full report. We have only the summary. So, and he asking why it's not in Russian, the full report. We need it in Russian.
Этот доклад очень нам нужен странам Центральной Азии. Просим, не жалейте сил, средств, тем более финансовых ресурсов, переведите полностью на русский язык и опубликуйте для нашего использования.
He said that this report is very crucial for Central Asia and it's important to have it in Russian. Please, yeah.
Yes, I understand your concerns. We will take those concerns back with us to UNESCO and to the IAEA, who also produce reports. And we will talk to them about trying to get a Russian version for you so that you can understand the full report.
Да, мы поговорим, да, мы обсудим.
Но это до конца года будет или нет?
Will it be done until the end of the year?
I can't give that commitment yet. I'd have to go back and speak to people. I think Aurelian would be the same. We would have to speak to management. But we understand the importance of having these reports in what is effectively the local language. So your concern is noted and we will raise it.
Мы, к сожалению, не можем сейчас утверждать, что мы его переведем до конца года, но мы понимаем важность этого репорта на русском языке для Центральной Азии. Начнем внутреннюю процедуру возможности такого перевода.
Хорошо,
но не можем этого обещать.
Мы были бы очень благодарны.
We would appreciate if it will be in Russian.
All right, thank you. Is there another question?
Здравствуйте. Я представляю Институт гидрогеологии Национальной академии наук Казахстана.
I'm representative of the Institute of Hydrogeology of the National Academy of Science of Kazakhstan.
Я участвовал в презентации в Алмате, и она меня совершенно не удовлетворила как специалиста.
I participated in the presentation that was organized by Almaty office, but I didn't like it at all.
Я хочу получить вашу презентацию в электронном виде на английском языке и тот отчет, который есть у нас в интернете, я его не смог взять. Тоже на английском. Мои сотрудники переведут. Потому что тема эта очень важная для нас. Мы хотели бы увидеть оригинал доклада, вашу презентацию, оригинал доклада, который...
This is a very important topic for us, and we would like to have the presentation you shared and the full report.
Is it possible?
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Do you want the full report in English or the full report in Russian? Is that what you're asking?
Or English, English.
In English.
In English.
It's online.
It's on.
Yeah,
is this Aurelian? Do you want to?
On the UNESCO platform, UNESCO doc platform, you can find web link to download all the version English and other languages of the summary report. So all is freely available. This is of course a policy of UNESCO to make all publication and information publicly available and open to everybody.
Все репорты у нас в открытом доступе на сайте, потому что это наше обязательство сделать их открытыми. Вы можете их найти на веб-сайте.
Вы мне поможете, да?
Да.
Хорошо, хорошо.
I will help you to
И ваш доклад тоже есть, да?
And your presentation as well. It will be good to have it.
Вы можете переслать мне на mail?
Could you please send it to my email?
Thank you. That's all. Спасибо.
Sorry, please, my bad English, but I am very glad. So your specialty science
Could you just
man.
identify yourself for the people online?
Oh,
There are people online listening. Could you just identify yourself again?
я
Your
понял.
your name and
My-
where you're from.
Да, я. Меня зовут. My name is Minarbekov Jamal Khan. I'm from Kazakhstan. I work in the Department of Water Resources in Taraz Regional University, Dulati. I'm very glad and underground water while working. This is very good job. Sorry, please, my bad English. I don't good speak, but I'm very glad and see this is program. I very specialty this here. Good job, science work. But I think in communicated in my university in your says in science work, but under and my university, my region, and under and Kyrgyz mountain, it's very special. It is very biggest problems in my city in Taraz, and under and city in Taraz and underground water is don't good clean. Вот, ну нечистая вода там у нас. Окей. Может на русском, да, сказать? Можешь айтайм, ну, проблема у нас это подземных вод, загрязнение подземных вод, вот состояние подземных вод. Очень проблематично у нас. В нашем городе, в городе Тараз и в окрестностях, я думаю, что совместно, как бы вот с такими учеными, как вы, изучить эту проблему, как бы, найти выходы, проблемы для решения этих проблем. Потому что, да, чистота воды для всех народностей, для народов без границ, для всех национальностей это очень важно. Спасибо большое за ваши работы, труды.
This is very valuable for us to hear that all the information shared in this report is important for you, and this is an important topic. And of course, our organization like UNESCO, we are always delighted to contribute with academic institution, universities, research institutes. We have Almaty office in the region, our colleague is here, so of course it's always of great interest, especially on this topic of groundwater.
Да, конечно, ЮНЕСКО работает в этом направлении. Это является очень важным фокусом для нас, работа по подземным водам и через наших коллег в Алматинском офисе. И мы обязательно будем сотрудничать с институтами, с представителями научных кругов для решения проблем, связанных с водой.
Thank you very much.
Извините, пожалуйста, я в знак благодарности должен отметить, что настоящее параллельное мероприятие по важности и значимости нисколько не уступает основным форумам, интерактивным панельным обсуждениям.
I should say that the parallel sessions, the side events, has a good, very high importance in line with the main sessions of this forum.
Параллельно вот это текущее параллельное мероприятие это стало открытием конференции. Это благодарим очень, мы все очень довольны этим мероприятием. Я рекомендую хотя бы до конца года в любой стране Центральной Азии можно провести отдельную конференцию по подземным водам.
This session is really a breakthrough of the whole conference of Dushanbe process, and I would recommend to and ask if it's possible to have the conference on groundwater in each Central Asia country by end of the year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Спасибо.
I think that might be a bit tricky, but we'd certainly welcome the participation of the Central Asian countries in the Groundwater Summit in Paris at the end of the year. Yes.
Да, мы были бы очень рады, если каждый участник в области подземных вод смог бы принять. И мы приглашаем к участию в нашей конференции по саммите по подземным водам, который состоится в Париже в конце года.
I think with that we might bring the session to a close. I'll just say one final word from my side, and that is to say thank you very much to Alice and all the support that she provided and information and help to me. She was not able to be here, but her presence is very much missed. And with that, I am closing the session. Thank you to everybody who participated.